I wasn't supposed to be home yet. That was the whole point of a business trip. Get out, handle your meetings, come back on schedule. I had planned to return on Thursday evening, just like Haley expected. But the client I flew out to meet bailed last minute. Something about a family emergency. And I figured, why waste time in a hotel room watching reruns? I grabbed an earlier flight back from Salt Lake, landed a little past noon. On the way home, I stopped at this small bakery Haley loves, tucked away in a strip mall near Ashby. They only bake maple pie on Wednesdays, and since it was Wednesday, I figured, what the hell? I'd surprise her. Maple pie, a hug, maybe an early dinner. Nothing dramatic, just a small, thoughtful gesture to say, hey, I missed you. I pulled into the driveway around 1:45 p.m. Her car was already there. Which, technically made sense. She works a hybrid schedule now. Sometimes she's home all day. Sometimes she bounces between job sites and Zoom calls from the kitchen table. But the thing that got me, the very first thing that pulled on that thread in my gut, was how quiet the house looked. Haley always had music playing when she was home alone. Always. Even when she was in the shower or on a call, there'd be some kind of background noise. Spotify playlists, true crime podcasts, even those weird ambient coffee shop sounds she claimed helped her focus. But today, nothing. Not a whisper. I walked up to the door slower than usual, carrying the pie in both hands like it might break if I moved too fast. Unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and immediately, I don't know, something in the air felt different. Like the house was holding its breath. The front entry was normal enough. Shoes lined up neatly against the wall. Except for one pair that wasn't. That pair stopped me in my tracks. Men's sneakers. Not mine. I stared at them for a long second. They were older, kind of worn down, caked with dried dirt around the edges. Definitely not Haley's. I tried to convince myself maybe they were a guest's. Someone dropping something off. A neighbor's son. Maybe? But who just kicks their shoes off and walks in? My stomach clenched. I set the pie on the kitchen counter and walked quietly toward the bathroom. The door was cracked open, light off. On the hook near the shower, a damp towel hung loosely, still dripping faintly. But the tile floor beneath it was bone dry. Not a drop. That made no sense. If someone had just used the shower, there'd be moisture. The kind that fogs mirrors, leaves a humid haze behind. But everything was cool and crisp, like someone had tried too hard to clean up after the fact. I stepped into the bedroom, careful not to make noise. At first glance, everything looked fine. The bed was made, too neatly, actually. Normally, Haley left it half done, with the comforter pulled lazily over a pile of mismatched pillows. This time, it looked like something out of a hotel. Perfect corners, everything tucked. But there it was, an impression on the far side. A fresh one. You don't live with someone long without noticing that kind of thing. The side I hadn't slept in for nearly a week now looked like it had just been occupied. And on the nightstand, 2 glasses of water. Both full. We never did that. I always drank bottled water. Always. Haley hated how wasteful it was, but I didn't like the taste of tap water, and we used to joke about it all the time. If I saw 2 glasses, one of them wasn't mine. I didn't touch anything. Just stood there, looking around the room like I'd stepped into a scene that had already happened. Too many things felt staged, intentional, like someone had tried to erase signs of something, but they didn't realize how much I notice. Then I heard her. Nick. Her voice came from the kitchen. Light, cheerful, too cheerful. I turned around as she walked into the room, wiping her hands on a dish towel, smiling like it was just any other Wednesday. "You're home early," she said, laughing a little. "I thought you weren't back until tomorrow night." "Meeting got canceled," I said casually, watching her eyes. "Figured I'd surprise you." She tilted her head. "That's sweet." Then she saw the pie box on the counter and smiled wider. "Maple? You remembered." "Of course," I said. There was a moment of silence. Then her gaze shifted slightly. I watched her eyes flick quickly toward the hallway. The sneakers. She didn't react much, but I saw the blink. Just one. Then she spoke. "Oh, if you saw the shoes, those are Casey's ex-husband's. She borrowed them, long story." She stopped by this morning, had kind of a meltdown. You know how she's been since the divorce? I nodded. Yeah. Yeah. She stayed for a bit, used the shower, she'd been on a run or something. I offered, obviously. Sorry, I meant to text you. It was kind of sudden. She said it all smoothly, like she'd rehearsed it, like she'd expected me to ask. And the towel? I asked. What about it? It's wet, but the floor's dry. She paused, then smiled. I wiped it down. You know how slippery it gets. Of course she had an answer for everything. What about the water glasses in the bedroom? I asked lightly, folding my arms. Oh, she laughed. I brought one in for Casey. She was curled up on the bed crying. Poor thing. Figured she could use something to drink. I didn't want to leave her alone in the living room. I nodded again, slow and quiet. She was good. Too good. She moved toward me and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. I'm glad you're back, she said. I missed you. I smiled. Said nothing. The thing is, Haley had always been a good liar. I just never thought she'd lie to me. That day I didn't confront her. Didn't accuse her. I acted like everything was fine. Because I knew something she didn't. People talk too much when they think they're safe. So I memorized everything. The way her voice lifted when she lied. The precise words she chose. The fake warmth in her eyes. And I knew one thing for sure. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. That night I couldn't sleep. Not really. I lay beside Haley, her back turned to me like always, pretending to breathe evenly, pretending everything was normal. But I wasn't pretending anymore. My mind was running backward mostly. Every moment I'd ignored, every offhand comment, every odd change I'd brushed off as no big deal, suddenly began falling into a shape I couldn't unsee. There had been signs. Too many. I just hadn't wanted to put them together. I had trusted her. That trust used to feel automatic, like breathing. But now it felt like a setup. Started maybe 3 months ago. That was when Haley suddenly started working late. Not occasionally, regularly. For sometimes 5 nights a week. She'd always hated her office's grind culture. Had complained endlessly about toxic coworkers and never getting overtime. But now, she stayed past 7 or 8, claiming there were big deadlines, or unexpected reviews, or client stuff that popped up. She made it sound plausible, even innocent. And the first few times I believed her. I even offered to pick her up, bring her dinner. She turned me down every time. Then there was the phone. We share a car. Technically it's mine, but she uses it for work a lot. One day I was driving it after she'd taken it the night before, and the Bluetooth picked up a device I didn't recognize. It showed up as Galaxy S22_John. I asked her about it and she barely blinked. Oh, that's probably Casey's, she said. She borrowed the car last week. Remember? She said that like it was true. I didn't even question it. Just deleted the connection and moved on. That was the beginning of my new bad habit, letting explanations substitute for answers. Then it was the perfume. Not hers. Not even close. It was heavier, more aggressive, with a musky sweetness that lingered in the hallway after she passed through. I asked if she'd switched scents and she laughed. Said she was trying something different. You like it? She asked, spinning slowly in the living room one evening, holding out her wrists. I forced a smile. Yeah, the strong. That night, I pulled our comforter up to my chin and stared at the ceiling for hours. I didn't ask who she was trying to impress. Another thing. She stopped leaving her laptop open. Haley used to keep it on the kitchen island, lid cracked, music playing in the background, casual as ever. But lately it was always closed, locked. If I touched it, even just to check the weather or send something to the printer, she'd swoop in within seconds, playfully scolding me like I was snooping. Just ask me next time, she'd say. But there was always tension behind her smile. I told myself I was being paranoid. But now I wonder if she was just being careful. Even her wardrobe changed. Not overnight, it was subtle. New blouses, new undergarments I'd never seen her wear. Haley had always been beautiful but not flashy. Suddenly, she was dressing like someone who expected to be noticed. I'd find little shopping bags hidden in the back of the closet, from brands she never wore. Not her usual laid-back stuff. This was more deliberate, lacy, delicate, int asterisk mate. The kind of things you don't wear just to feel cute. I'd ask and she'd roll her eyes. Don't overthink it. I saw a sale. Big deal. So I let it go. Again. What haunts me now is how well she trained me not to ask questions. I think the worst part, honestly, is how natural it all felt. Not the lies, those were new, but the disconnection that crept in slowly, like rust under paint. We stopped having real conversations. Our dinners grew shorter. Her replies to texts became curt. Yep. Cool. Okay. Calls went unanswered. And when she was home, she always had one foot out the door. I'd ask how her day was, and she'd say, same old, then go right back to scrolling. We weren't fighting. Not loudly, at least. That's what made it so easy to ignore. But now, with everything clicking into place, I realized we had become two people living parallel lives, just far enough apart not to notice how far we drifted. And there was this one time, maybe the moment I should have known. I planned a weekend for us up in Vermont. Just a simple thing. Little cabin, good food, time off the grid. When I told her about it, her reaction was delayed. Forced. Ah, babe, she said. That's so sweet. I think I have that conference thing, though. Maybe the week after? There was no conference. I found out later it had been moved to virtual. She never corrected herself. And when the weekend came, she suddenly had a migraine. I went alone. Spent 2 days in a cabin, walking trails, drinking too much coffee, waiting for her to call. She didn't. Now I know why. But back then, I blamed myself. I wondered if I was being too clingy, too invested. I even texted her something dumb like, "Hope your head's better. I miss you." She replied 4 hours later with a single emoji. For hours. And a thumbs up. The more I look back, the more I realize I wasn't paranoid. I was asleep. You know that feeling when you sense a fire just outside your field of vision? You smell smoke, hear the crackle, but you convince yourself it's just the neighbor's grill. That was me. I smelled the smoke months ago. I just didn't want to see the flames. Now, I couldn't unsee them if I tried. I started keeping track of things after I got back from Salt Lake. Quietly. No accusations. Just observation. Every lie became easier to detect. Not because she got worse at hiding them, but because I finally started listening. Like the time she said she was at the gym, but came back with perfectly done hair and dry clothes. Or when I asked who she was texting, and she replied, "Just Casey." Then angled her screen away from me and turned the brightness down. Or when she started calling me babe more often than Nick. Like she was avoiding the name itself. Like it carried guilt. Then there was the last straw. I was cleaning out the back seat of the car when I found a receipt wedged between the cushions. One of those tiny, curled thermal printouts you'd normally toss. It was from a wine bar I didn't recognize. The date matched one of her late nights. 2 glasses of wine. 1 charcuterie board. I stared at the receipt so long the ink started to smudge under my fingers. When she got home that night, I didn't say anything. I set the receipt in my sock drawer, beneath a stack of old concert tees. A silent trophy for a truth I wasn't ready to confront. Maybe I was waiting. For what? I don't know. A confession? A breakdown? Proof so undeniable that even Haley couldn't smooth it over? Or maybe I was hoping, stupidly, that I was wrong. But deep down I knew I wasn't. The betrayal wasn't a flashbang. It wasn't one dramatic moment where the whole world flipped upside down. It was a slow leak. 1 drop at a time, until I looked around and realized the whole floor was wet and I was standing in it barefoot, wondering how it got that way. So I stopped asking questions. Not because I didn't want answers, but because I already had them. By the time the weekend came around, I thought the worst was behind me. I'd accepted, not out loud but privately, that Haley wasn't who I thought she was. I had no grand plan, no confrontation rehearsed, just this quiet, cold clarity that had settled into my chest like a second heartbeat. I started sleeping in the guest room under the excuse of snoring. She didn't push back, didn't ask questions. But everything changed the day Savannah called. Our daughter had gone off to a bachelorette retreat with a few friends. a long weekend at some rustic lodge up north. They'd rented a place in the mountains with no cell service and limited Wi-Fi. Disconnect to reconnect, the invite had said. Mostly I figured it'd be wine, dumb games, and spa facials. The usual stuff you do when you're 19 and full of hope and Pinterest quotes. I wasn't worried. Savannah's a smart kid. Grounded, thoughtful, a better version of both her parents, honestly. Haley and I raised her with love, if nothing else. I knew that much was true. When she called that Sunday evening, her voice sounded different. Hollow, like she'd walked into a room expecting light and found a locked door instead. "Hey, Dad," she said. "You got a minute?" "Of course," I said immediately, already walking toward the back porch, shutting the screen door behind me. "Everything okay?" She hesitated, long enough that I stopped walking. "I did something kind of weird," she said. "At the party. One of those DNA kits." I smiled faintly. "What, like a 23andMe thing?" "Yeah, sort of. It was supposed to be a joke, we all did it. Find your Viking roots or whatever. Nothing serious." "Okay." "But I got the results today. They emailed them early. The full report's still coming." "But," she trailed off. "But what?" I asked, suddenly aware of how cold the evening air had gotten. "It flagged something about parentage. Said there was no paternal match." I blinked. "What does that mean?" "I mean," her voice broke, "it means the man who raised me, you, doesn't share my DNA." I didn't say anything. Couldn't. "I thought it was a glitch," she went on quickly. "Like, maybe the data was off or I entered the wrong email. But it's real. It's my sample." I triple-checked. "And, Dad, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Don't worry. Could be an error. We'll check. Get the full results, we'll look through them together. There's probably an explanation." Mom said there wasn't. I stopped breathing. "What?" I showed her the summary when I got home. She didn't look surprised, Dad. She didn't even blink. She just stood there. Said she was sorry I had to find out that way. A gust of wind cut through the trees, sharp and bitter. "I asked her who my biological father was," Savannah whispered. "She said it wasn't important, that she and you decided to raise me as yours. She said it didn't change anything." "But it does," I murmured. "Doesn't it?" I closed my eyes. Images rushed through my mind. The day Savannah was born, the first time she fell asleep on my chest, the father-daughter dances, the late-night homework marathons, every school project and scraped knee and whispered pep talk before a big exam. 19 years. And Haley had stood next to me the whole time, letting me believe it was real. "I don't care what the test says," I said finally. "You're my daughter." There was silence on the other end. Then a quiet sob. "I know," she said, "but it still hurts. She lied to both of us." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry." We didn't talk long after that. She said she was staying at a friend's place for the night. Needed space. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for more. I just stood there in the dark until my phone battery gave out and the screen went black. When I walked back into the house, Haley was sitting on the couch. She looked up as I entered. Her face was dry. No tears. No panic. Just this exhausted sort of acceptance, like she knew the dam had finally broken and there was no use trying to hold it back. "You talked to her," she said. I nodded. "She told you?" "She didn't have to," I said. "You already did." She lowered her eyes. "It was only once. A long time ago." "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't minimize it." "I'm not," she said. "But it's the truth." "No," I said, stepping closer. "The truth would have been telling me when it happened. Telling me before I signed the birth certificate. Before I stayed up all night while you recovered. Before I coached her basketball team and braided her hair and paid for college tours." She winced. "I was scared. I didn't think. You didn't want to lose me," I finished for her. She nodded, lips trembling. "You were the only good thing in my life at the time. I was selfish. I thought if I buried it deep enough, it would go away." "But it didn't," I said. "You buried it in our daughter. In me." I never stopped loving you, she said softly. You're still her dad. I stared at her for a long time. That's the first true thing you've said all night, I replied. Then I walked upstairs, opened my suitcase, and started packing. I didn't slam doors, didn't shout. I moved quietly, methodically, like I was cleaning up after a spill, because that's what it was. A slow leak of truth that had soaked through 19 years of memories. And the damage couldn't be undone. Savannah showed up the next morning without warning. She didn't ask questions. She just stood in the driveway with her old suitcase and a scrapbook clutched in her arms, the one we used to update every year with school photos and vacation postcards. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just waited. And I understood. She didn't want to stay here. Not with Haley. Not in the house built on silence. So we left, quietly, without ceremony, and drove north to the cabin by the lake in New Hampshire. My grandfather built it back in the 60s. It was falling apart in places, the dock was rotting, and the kitchen smelled like cedar and old paint. But it was ours. Mine. A place untouched by the weight of her lies. I didn't speak much on the drive. Neither did Savannah. We just let the road carry us forward, away from the museum of betrayals we used to call home. When we arrived, the lake was still. The kind of stillness that only comes after something breaks. We unpacked, made the beds, opened the windows. I found an old radio in the closet and tuned it to a crackly station that played jazz. Savannah fell asleep on the couch under a quilt my mother had made before she passed. And I sat there, staring at her, wondering how I'd ever explain any of this. I had lost my wife, but I hadn't lost my daughter. Not really. What bound us wasn't DNA. It was everything in between. The scraped knees, the late-night drives, the jokes only we understood, the rhythm of a bond that had taken root long before either of us realized how deep it went. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't finished. That somewhere in the years we thought were settled, a stranger had passed through our lives, left his mark, and disappeared without a trace. I needed to find him, not to fix anything, but to understand the lie I'd been forced to live, and maybe to end it on my own terms. We stayed quiet for the first few days at the cabin. Savannah spent most of her time sketching on the porch, headphones in, hoodie up. She didn't say much, but she stayed close. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me, eyes filled with some emotion too tangled to name. Not quite fear, not quite grief. I didn't push. Couldn't. She was processing something I'd barely come to terms with myself. And me? I found comfort in routine. Chopping wood. Fixing the wobbly leg on the old dining table. Cleaning out the attic. The kind of mundane, mindless work that lets you stay busy while your insides rearrange themselves. But the silence was heavy, not the peaceful kind. It was the kind that carries weight. Truth sitting in the air like dust on sunlight. On the third morning, I opened the crawl space and found a box I hadn't seen since college. It was one of those dusty, half-crushed banker's boxes labeled in my mom's handwriting. Nick, summer 2003 to 2006. Inside were yearbooks, some photos, concert tickets, a stack of letters tied with blue ribbon, and, oddly, a half-torn notebook Haley had once used for poetry. I flipped through it absent-mindedly, expecting angsty metaphors and abandoned verses. Instead, tucked between 2 pages, I found a note. Not folded, just pressed flat like it had been hidden, not forgotten. Thank you for being there when I didn't know who I was. You made that year survivable. You don't know what that meant to me. J. No return address. No date. Just the single initial. J. I stared at it for a long time. At first, I assumed it was nothing, a friend, maybe. Haley had always been social, surrounded by people I barely remembered from that time in our lives. But something about the way it was worded, you don't know what that meant to me, sat wrong. It felt more int asterisk mate than friendship. I dug deeper into the box. Found a photo album tucked beneath old postcards. Black leather cover, faint mildew scent. Flipping through it, I paused on a single image. Haley, standing outside a cafe I didn't recognize, shoulder to shoulder with a man I didn't know. They weren't kissing, not holding hands, but their bodies leaned into each other like it was second nature. Familiar. Comfortable. What grabbed me wasn't the pose, it was their hands. Her fingers looped through his in a way that felt practiced. I turned the photo over. Briar Patch Cafe, August 2004. Below that, a little scribble in Haley's writing. Jason H. J. I didn't ask Haley about him. Didn't text. Didn't call. I just sat at the old cabin table that night, laptop open, using the spotty Wi-Fi to dig up the past. It wasn't hard. People leave trails, especially people who once owned small businesses. It turns out the Briar Patch Cafe closed in 2008, but its former owner, Jason Hartley, now ran an auto shop in Providence, Rhode Island. Still in the business registry. Still findable. I stared at the screen for almost an hour. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. A confession? A denial? Some ugly truth I already half knew? But the next morning, I left Savannah a note and took the car. The drive took just under 3 hours. I didn't tell her where I was going. I needed this to be mine. The shop was tucked between a laundromat and a vacant storefront. Nothing special. Just a grease-stained awning with Hartley Auto in chipped red paint. I parked across the street, staring at the entrance like it might reveal something by itself. Didn't. So I walked in. There was music playing inside. Low, classic rock. And the smell of burnt rubber and motor oil hung thick in the air. A man stood near the back, wiping his hands on a rag, talking to a younger guy over the hood of a Jeep. I didn't recognize him, but he recognized me. His eyes landed on mine, and something in his face changed. Not panic, exactly, but a flicker of something. Awareness. Recognition. He walked over slowly. "You need help?" he asked, polite but wary. "Are you Jason Hartley?" He nodded. "Depends who's asking." "My name's Nick Rivers," I said. He stared at me for half a beat too long. "Haley's husband," I added just to end the suspense. He blinked, said nothing. "She said you weren't the father," I continued, my voice quiet. "Said it wasn't worth revisiting." Jason looked away, back toward the Jeep. "Yeah," he said finally. "That's what she told me too." "When did you find out she was pregnant?" "Never," he said simply. That answer hit harder than I expected. "I left town in October '04, he added. "We'd had something, kind of a mess. She said she wasn't ready for anything serious. I was in a rough place, financially and personally. So I left, got the cafe sold off and restarted out here." "You never wondered?" "Of course I wondered," he said. "But when someone tells you they're sure, and that it's not you, you believe them. Or you try to." There was no anger in his voice, just this quiet resignation that felt oddly familiar. "I didn't come here for a fight," I said. "I just wanted to know the truth. For Savannah. For myself." He nodded. "She's 19. Smart. Tough. She's the best thing I ever did." He gave a soft smile. "Sounds like she got the right father." I wasn't sure what to say to that. We talked a little longer. About nothing important. Weather. Work. What Providence is like these days. When I left, he didn't ask for a number or a photo. He just said, "If she ever wants to know who I am, I'll be here. No pressure." I nodded. "I'll let her decide." The drive back was silent. My hands stayed loose on the wheel, eyes locked on the road, but my mind was spinning in 10 directions. I had answers now. They didn't make me feel better, but they stopped the bleeding. Jason Hartley wasn't a monster. He hadn't disappeared. He just believed her, like I had. When I pulled into the cabin's driveway, it was nearly sunset. The lake shimmered with gold and orange and blue. Savannah was sitting on the porch steps, arms wrapped around her knees. She didn't speak when I walked up. I sat beside her. "Where'd you go?" she asked after a minute. "Rhode Island." She looked over. "Why?" "To meet someone." She paused. "Jason." I nodded. A long silence followed. Then she whispered, "Is he a bad guy?" "No," I said. "Just another person who got lied to." She didn't respond. We sat there until the sky turned purple. Inside, the old radio played something slow and wordless. The air smelled like pine. I didn't know what came next, but I knew what came before. And that was enough for now. When you lose trust in someone you love, it's not like flipping a switch. It's quieter than that. Slower, like a thread unraveling in your hand. You keep holding on, but there's less and less left to grip. By the time you notice how much is gone, the damage is done. That's what it felt like with Haley. Not a bang. A slow, eroding hush. After I came back from Rhode Island, I didn't tell Savannah anything right away. She didn't ask. I think she could read it in my face. That whatever I'd gone looking for, I'd found it. That the question she'd carried since the day she saw that DNA report had finally settled. Even if the ache hadn't. We spent the next few days in an almost fragile peace. She cooked breakfast one morning. I fixed the back porch steps. We played a card game we hadn't touched since she was a kid, Go Fish of all things, and laughed like we were faking it but still meant it a little. Then, on the 5th morning, I woke up to find her already packed. Her suitcase sat by the door. Her sketchbook, the one she carried everywhere since she was 12, was closed, resting gently on top. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. I stood in the doorway, watching her sit cross-legged on the cabin floor, flipping through an old scrapbook I hadn't seen in years. One of those big spiral-bound ones with mismatched pages, glitter stickers, and plastic sleeves for each memory. I recognized the cover immediately. Savannah, years 1 to 10, in her own glitter pen handwriting. She used to update it every birthday like a ritual. Haley helped her in the early years. After that, it became her private project. She was on the last page when I spoke. "You sure?" She didn't look up, just nodded. I walked over, knelt beside her. She slid the scrapbook toward me without saying anything, and I opened it slowly, page by page. A drawing she made of the three of us. Crooked smiles, giant hands, her stick-figure version of the family dog who passed when she was 6. A crayon-colored Valentine from 1st grade that read, "You're the best daddy in the world." A photo of us fishing, me holding the rod, her holding the line, both of us grinning like idiots even though we hadn't caught a thing. Every page was packed with moments I remembered better than my own birthdays. And every one of them had been built on a lie I hadn't known I was living. But I wasn't angry in that moment. I was just hollow. "She didn't say anything when you got home?" I asked quietly. Savannah finally looked at me. She said she thought it was better this way, that keeping the secret spared everyone pain. "And you believed her?" Her face didn't change. "No. Do you hate her?" She took a long time to answer. Then she said, "I don't think I can, but I can't look at her either." That was the answer I expected. And yet it still broke me a little. She stood, lifted the suitcase, and glanced around like she was saying goodbye to something invisible. I grabbed the keys. "Where to?" She looked at me and shrugged. "Anywhere that isn't that house." So we left. Again. We didn't tell Haley. We didn't send a message. There was no confrontation, no slammed doors. Just a quiet leaving, like ghosts stepping out of a story. We drove back to the city, but we didn't go home. Savannah had a friend she trusted, a girl named Morgan, whose family had a spare room. They offered it without question. I helped carry her bags in, hugged her at the door, and said I'd be nearby if she needed anything. She didn't say much, but she held onto that hug longer than usual. After she was settled, I drove back to the house. Not because I wanted to, but because it was time to face what was left. Haley was in the kitchen when I walked in. She looked up, startled, like she didn't expect to see me again. "Where's Savannah?" she asked. "She's safe," I said. "She's staying with friends." Haley nodded like she already knew. "She wouldn't talk to me," she said, voice thin. "I tried. I really did." I didn't answer. I walked into the living room, took a long look around. Same couch, same pictures on the wall, same ticking clock that had once marked family dinners and lazy Sundays. But now it all felt like a museum exhibit, a display of who we used to be. "I met him," I said finally, not looking at her. "Jason." Haley didn't speak. "He didn't know," I went on. You told him the child wasn't his. You never told him about Savannah. I was scared, she whispered. No, I said, turning to face her. You were in control. You picked your narrative and stuck to it. For 19 years. She opened her mouth to respond, but I raised a hand. I'm not here to argue. I'm not here to yell. I just came back to say goodbye. Tears welled in her eyes. Nick, I'm not your husband anymore, I said. You broke that contract when you chose silence over honesty. When you decided I didn't deserve the truth. She wiped her face but didn't move closer. What about Savannah? She asked. She's still my daughter. Maybe, I said. But you don't get to decide what that means anymore. That's her choice now. Haley started to sob, soft, breathless. I didn't stay. I went upstairs, packed a single bag. Some clothes. My toiletries. My laptop. I left the rest, the furniture, the photos, the books. I didn't need any of it. When I came back down, she was sitting at the dining table, hands shaking. I'm sorry, she said. I know. I opened the door. Nick, please. I stopped but didn't turn around. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You didn't mean to get caught, I said. Everything else, you meant. Then I left. I didn't go back to the cabin. Not right away. Instead, I checked into a small roadside motel just outside the city. Not glamorous, just quiet. That night, I sat on the edge of a twin bed and stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead. I thought about Savannah, sleeping somewhere unfamiliar, carrying a truth too heavy for her age. I thought about Haley, alone in a house filled with echoes. And I thought about myself, not with pity, just reflection. I had spent 19 years giving everything I had to a family I thought was built on love. And in a way it was, just not the whole kind, not the honest kind. But Savannah, she was real. She had been my purpose, my anchor, my proof that I could be good at something. And even now, that didn't change. She still called me Dad. And I still was. Whatever came next, court papers, counseling, silence. I knew one thing. Savannah had made her choice. She hadn't screamed, hadn't demanded answers. She just walked out the door, scrapbook in hand, and trusted I'd follow. And I did, because some things aren't broken. They're just tested. And love, the real kind, passes that test in silence.